Looks like everyone's reasonably well fed. If they had any room left after that fantastic dinner last night. I knew if there was one thing you could count on when we were having the exchange here in Minneapolis, in Jane's hometown, that we'd have a good restaurant for the press dinner. That was one thing that I knew would come true, and it very much proved to be the case. That was an excellent venue last night. I hope everyone had a great time that was there. I know I did. Despite the rain, fortunately we were indoors, so that part worked. Okay, you know, we talked yesterday a lot about the digital transformation that's undergoing in our industry. We talked a lot about the skill sets that are going to be required for employees to become digitally transformed and to really get the advantage of all this great technology. We told you about a lot of the research we had done, but it turns out that there was really a vast body of research that was done in the 60s that we just recently discovered last night. We thought we'd share with you one of the more important findings from this particular research.
You gotta have it up here to know how to start these things and stop them and start them again.
And there you are. You know, we've been making a big deal about all the effort it's going to take to do this digital transformation, and they had it all figured out back there in the 60s. In fact, if you grew up while watching the Jetsons like I did, it wasn't a robot apocalypse that was coming. You were looking forward to the days when the robots were going to do all the mundane tasks, and you were going to have the self-driving cars, and you were going to spend your time in the lap of luxury like most of the Jetson episodes did if you watched it. George worked something like 2 hours a day, and this is the one thing I remember was my favorite complaint when he'd come home is he'd say, man, my boss basically is a slave driver. I had to push the button twice today. So that was at least one vision that we had in the 60s of what the digitized and automated future was going to look like. So what we're going to do today is try to make good on some of the promises that I told you yesterday that we would talk about. I'm going to give you just a quick recap of what we talked about, and then I'm going to talk about some of the new technology and advances we've done in the actual Plantweb digital ecosystem. Then we're going to have Jamie Froge come up, and he's going to talk to you about some of the exciting new software as a service offerings that we have. And then we spent a lot of time talking about this consulting services and all of the service capability we're adding to the organization to help in the transformation. And Tom Wan and Mozam Shamsi are going to come up and talk to you about those two. And then Tanner is going to come and talk to us about Emerson's specific commitment on education. We, of course, heard in a very animated fashion from Stan yesterday about what he's doing in his particular school to build these digital workers of the future. Then we can hear what Emerson's doing. Then I'll do a little recap, and we'll have a quick Q&A, and that will be very dependent on the time we have, because we need to get all of you out of here promptly on time to get over to see our terrific Shakopee facility. It'll be a little bit of a bus ride, but we've arranged to make the bus ride entertaining and informative as well. And then you'll have a great tour there of one of our premier manufacturing facilities in the Emerson circuit. And now you'll be all revved up with questions to ask them about what they're doing in terms of their digital transformation, or what they're doing in terms of applying technology to the manufacturing process there. So with that, we'll start with a little safety moment. As Mike told you yesterday, we have these 12 safety behaviors that we're instilling across our organization. Part of the way we do that is to start all of our meetings with a safety moment. This is one that I like to come back to because I personally know 4 people that I've worked with that have suffered with deep vein thrombosis, or a DVT, as a result of extensive travel, sometimes combined with other stuff. Many of us do a lot of traveling in our jobs, in our daily activities, and this is a real thing to watch out for, that as you're traveling, that, you know, between the combination of the altitude, the lack of movement, and a lot of doctors believe the knee position when you're sitting there bent kind of cuts off some of the flow, that you can develop clots in your legs. And those clots are bad enough when we're in your legs, but if they actually then travel and lodge in your lungs, it's called a pulmonary embolism, a PE, that's very bad. And I actually worked with one guy one time where that happened to him, and he was in the hospital for a long time, and he ended up having to have a filter installed in his aorta, and it was It was a whole bunch of things that you'd be better off avoiding if possible. And so you can see the biggest thing there is to move. Do not cross your legs while you're on a plane. That's actually another one that contributes to that. Stay hydrated and wear compression socks. And this actually is very applicable to everyone in all ages. I mean, it's not something that it's just, if you're older or younger or whatever, it happens to, there's some well-documented cases of people in their 20s who've had this happen to them, and it's turned into a PE and they died from it. So it affects all ages. So it's something to definitely watch out for if you're someone that goes traveling, especially on long-haul flights of 6 hours or more. So just a recap of what we talked about yesterday. Mike started out with this chart in the morning. Mike and I both used it again during the day. We've seen a lot of improvement over the years in the industrial workforce and in the industrial processes, but we've kind of reached the era of diminishing returns. Again, I think a lot of this was automation of the process helped contribute to this productivity improvement, and that what we're going to need to do now to get to that next level of improvement is apply some of these 5 essential competencies to achieve digital transformation in these other areas like reliability, safety, energy, the things that we talked about yesterday and we'll talk about more today. Again, we did a bunch of research. This is research from IHS as well as some of our own internal consulting organization where we said, hey, we know what it takes for an organization to transform themselves. We know what those behaviors are. And then Tom will talk today in Mozam around how our consulting organization is prepared to help an organization make that transformation. And then this is what it will look like when it comes to the actual job functions today. This is the transformation that we're talking about as far as the personal impact on specific jobs and employees and the transition from those more routine, mundane tasks. Okay, we want to automate those workflows. We want to make it so that those workers are spending more time working on opportunities or potentially solving problems or abnormalities. And I use this analogy where, hey, we've done a digital transformation, right? And all of our processes are digitally closed loop controlled. No one would think of having their controls on their process running open loop or not having the sensors and the knowledge codified to automate what happens inside of their process today. The opportunity is to do the same thing in some of these other functional areas so that those become automated, that the routine is taken care of without intervention, and people are spending their time on the exceptions. This is another concept that I think is very important. We used this chart last year when we introduced the Plantweb digital ecosystem. For us at Emerson, as we've said many times, we believe that the whole industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT, is an evolution, not a revolution. We have spent, in the process industries at least that we serve, the idea of sensors driving applications, as I just said earlier, not a new concept. What is new is applying it to these other operational areas. And the other thing that is new is some of these deployment methods that have been talked about more recently in the last few years. So the traditional deployment method of a local expert or a locally deployed application. Customers in the last 10, 15 years moving to this model of the integrated operations center or monitoring and diagnostics center, as they call it in the power industry, where they centralize their expertise and they have that expertise looking over a fleet or multiple assets or plants. And then in the last few years, we spent a lot more time talking about what we call the connected service in IIoT terminology. The idea where that data actually goes to a third-party expert. That third-party expert can be us, Emerson, okay? And that data is analyzed by those people who have that specific domain expertise, and what they send back is a diagnosis of work instructions. So that's another, way of closing the loop, as you see right there. But in that case, the loop, the control algorithm, if you will, might be a third party. And this is where we're really truly taking advantage of the internet, because the data, the smarts, and the action do not need to be in the same place. They can be anywhere in the world. So last year, we introduced the Plantweb digital ecosystem. And you saw a chart very similar to this many times last year, both in our press conferences and through different papers and presentations out inside the exchange itself. Over the course of the last year, we've actually been going out and running seminars and customer seminars. We think we've touched close to 5,000 customers across the globe as we've gone out and talked about Plantweb and IoT and digital transformation in different cities everywhere in the world. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to walk you through some of the new things that we've added, some of the expansions we've had. The fundamental premise and layout of this chart remains the same. It's data on the bottom, okay, feeding applications, whether those applications are on-premise applications that customers run or connected services that we, Emerson, are running. And then that's driving the results, with always aware that layer being in there to make sure that everyone has complete awareness all the time of what's going on, no matter where they are. And we gave some examples yesterday of where that applies. Some of the new things we've added that we're going to talk about today is consulting and software as a service. So those are two areas that we're going to focus on in some later discussions. I'm going to start out, and I'm going to just give you a quick update on what's going on in some of the more product-oriented areas that you see there in pink. Of course, all of this is built on the light blue, which is that solid foundation of automation technology that we've provided over the last 30 years, right? That is a very important basis on which to collect the data and to drive a lot of the applications that may be new IoT applications that you have, complemented by new sensors that you may put in specifically for those application areas. So pervasive sensing, with pervasive sensing, here again the concept is a whole generation of sensors that's targeted not just at the traditional process measurements that you use to control the plant, but these are measurements that can directly support applications in those other areas of safety, environmental, energy, and of course reliability. We have a very broad portfolio that we've introduced over the past 10 years, as you saw from Mike. It's our 10-year anniversary of wireless, of our first output of wireless transmitters. Wireless is a very key part of pervasive sensing, because fundamentally with pervasive sensing, we're looking at sensors that are easy to deploy, easy to support, and can easily be connected and communicate. And of course, wireless is the most obvious, intuitive way to have sensors that are easy to communicate, right? Without having to worry about running additional wires or having spare wires. It becomes very straightforward. And you heard Tom Matalau yesterday talk exactly about that at his facility in Chevron, where he talked about now that they have, you know, the infrastructure installed for wireless, some of the new applications that they're looking at, and how some of the process engineers are very excited about the opportunities to put in new sensors much more easily and cheaply than it would have been if they were wired. What we're introducing here at the Exchange that's new this year is a wireless toxic gas monitor. So I think this very directly illustrates one of the principles we talked about under automated workflow of eliminating personnel in hazardous areas. I can't think of an example that more directly shows you, here's the old way, here's a guy, you're going to turn them into what they used to use canaries for. You're going to have them go in and check an area, you know, to see if there's any, you know, toxic gases present. Well, this is a much safer and a better way to improve the overall safety in the facilities, to have permanently installed network of sensors that are telling you ahead of time before anyone ever gets near that area that there's toxic gas present. Some of the other enhancements that we've done is an explosion-proof approval for the thumb. The thumb is a device that can be attached to any existing heart device and turn it into a wireless device. Okay, it basically siphons a small amount of power off of that 4 to 20 signal that's on the device anyways. Now with wireless, with explosion-proof approval, that can be mounted literally anywhere in the facility. And then high accuracy version of our guided wave radar. And of course, you can see how this is keeping people off tanks. There's still a lot of places in the oil and gas industry where they go out in oil fields and they manually measure tanks. Not a very safe operation as guys climb up and down tanks. Toxic gas is another factor there. This eliminates all the work and hazards associated with tank measurement. We talked about the secure first mile when we introduced the Plantweb digital ecosystem. And I think we spent a lot of time last year. One of the things we focused on was kind of the second one that you see here around this idea of using the data diode. Well, I think there was some misunderstandings at that point that we were talking just about that. Well, that was an example of really multiple ways of connecting data securely and robustly between the OT environment and the IT environment. And as we've developed our connected services, we're productizing many different of these connection structures. In fact, this physically independent network where we actually use a wireless sensor network going through 3G is what we have deployed in Singapore at Denka, one of our other sites there that is doing steam trap monitoring. And then, the traditional Purdue model, I think we talked about that more last year, but also, many of our customers have OSI, Pi systems, and we can use the OSI Pi Cloud Connect as a technology also to bring data in securely for connected services. Plantweb Insight is a set of load and go type applications that are pre-configured analytics for very specific functions or asset classes. Last year, when we introduced the concept of Plantweb Insight, we had launched 3 different types of applications, as you can see here: steam traps, pumps, and the wireless pressure gauge. The wireless pressure gauge was another very innovative, pervasive sensing instrument we had introduced. If you'd seen that, literally looks just like a mechanical pressure gauge, but actually wirelessly transmits the signal also at the same time. We're very happy to announce that we won the Valor Award for the Insight applications. And we've now introduced a new Insight application around heat exchangers. So this is going to look at a heat exchanger, tell you when the efficiency has gone down to the point where it behooves you to go in and clean it. So it gives you that energy savings as well as process performance. And we still have a roadmap of a number of additional Insight applications that will be coming out over the course of the next year. So if you're here next year, you'll hear more about those Insight applications and some of the new technology that we will be coming out with those. And then Advisor is a more broad-based, first principle model-driven suite of applications. Works in 3 different areas, as you can see there. That's what we launched last year: equipment efficiency, equipment health analysis, and site-wide energy management. These are applications that look across an entire plant, or can even look across multiple plants. End users are free to go in and configure, build their own displays, do whatever they'd like to do with these applications. We now have added a new Advisor application, and that one is for mining. We actually have a research center down in Chile that works directly with some of the mining companies there, and they've developed some unique technology around monitoring some of the big equipment that you find in the mining industry. They've also all been enhanced with a new HTML5 HCD designed set of human interfaces. So we went through in careful detail with our HCD experts how to build these applications so that you got the best exposure of the data. They conveyed that in the most effective way to the operator, and we have redone now a consistent set of interfaces across that suite. Again, this is illustrating automated workflow and mobility, because these applications are now available on mobile devices since they're HTML5 based. And it's a big part of making sure that core competency that end users talked about, where the assets are monitored and reported. And then in Always Aware, we have a number of software applications that make sure that you have constant awareness of what's happening in your facility, no matter where you are. One of the ones we introduced last year was DeltaV Mobile. And of course, you can see DeltaV Mobile down there on the show floor. If you get to the show floor, hopefully you all do. We actually had a little example in my presentation yesterday where we used DeltaV Mobile in one of the little examples of the 5 essential competencies. Another application that we have that's a big part of this Always Aware is AMS Aries. And AMS Aries we launched last year. That was the first year we had it here at the Exchange. We've since added additional software that can be integrated into AMS Aries, most notably AMS Device Manager. So AMS Aries brings together alerts and data and information for all kinds of different applications that may be performing the actual analysis of the equipment, as you can see here on the bottom, such as our Insight and Advisor applications, our Machinery Manager suite, and now Device Manager. So all of the diagnostics and all of the people who have AMS Device Manager systems can layer AMS Aries on top of that and integrate alerts from that equipment together with alerts from other software applications that are generating device equipment and get that summary of that equipment on mobile devices such as their iPhone or Android-based phone. And then connected services is where, again, Emerson is doing the analysis of the data that is coming from a customer site, providing reports and providing work instruction and direction, closing the loop on that workflow for customers, telling them what they need to do to actually achieve best performance. We've had 4 different offerings in that area, as you see on the left-hand side of the chart, where we've had system health monitoring, where we monitor customers' DeltaV systems, not the data, not the process data inside those systems, but the actual DeltaV systems themselves, the controllers, the I/O cards, the PCs, the switches, to make sure that equipment's all functioning correctly. Control valves, okay, the muscle, as Terry likes to call it, as you heard from Terry yesterday. Steam traps, I already mentioned that one. And of course, rotating equipment. Those applications all worked with manual data collection and export to Emerson experts. So that data was collected on site in an application, and then it was FTP'd or emailed or whatever to us for analysis. We're about to launch our first streaming automated collection based on Microsoft Azure technology. And that's going to be for the valve monitoring application, and that's coming just next month, where we're going to eliminate the need for customers to do any effort at all to collect that data, and we're going to get a continuous streaming, high accuracy set of data coming from those valves on that customer site. And then in March, the next step comes when we're actually going to transition the applications themselves to be native Azure-based analytics applications using some of the services that are there. So going forward, our partnership in this area, as we told you last year, is with Microsoft and Microsoft Azure. And we see that as a terrific environment for doing all these analytics in. And the vision here is easy to see. It's a suite of different services for different asset classes, with the customers having a common portal that they go to in Azure, taking advantage of the scalability and security that Microsoft's provided there to look at what's happening with their assets. Some of the other areas that we're working on for new connected service capability is managing the Wi-Fi infrastructure, so the gateways and infrastructure that make up the Wi-Fi network, like Tom talked about yesterday, as well as some of the other applications we may have, such as Insight or Advisor, and deploying them in the cloud. And you're going to hear Jamie talk very shortly about our whole plans there for more software as a service, cloud-based, and that would include Insight and Advisor. And then there's one really big foundational technology that we're launching here at the Exchange. So if you remember on the Plantweb chart that I showed you earlier, all of the IIoT stuff is built on this great foundation of automation technology that we've had for 30 years. In DeltaV, as part of DeltaV version 14, we're introducing an all-new operations experience for DeltaV that we call DeltaV Live. Now, we introduced parts of version 14 last year at the Exchange, like the PK controller. And the PK controller is here in the flesh at the Exchange this year. A year ago, we didn't quite have production models of it done. Now we do. So you can go see that for real, as well as a lot of the other version 14 features. We didn't talk about DeltaV Live last year because, to be frank, we weren't sure we were going to be able to make it in the release. It was a big development for us, but we were able to do so, and it's now really going to be one of the landmark technologies as part of version 14. So DeltaV Live is a modern HTML5, native HTML5 based operations experience for DeltaV. And really there's a lot of things I could talk about. There's probably three areas that I want to hit that are the most important. First of all, what we did is, again, we took all of our human-centered design practices and those personas I showed you yesterday, and we went through the years and thousands of display building experience that we have in our engineering team, and we took that knowledge and we put it all into the actual engineering tools for building the displays here with DeltaV Live. So a lot of the things that our engineering guys had to build with scripting, a lot of the best practices in how you built shapes and objects or how you animated things, we made all of that native features in the engineering tool set inside of DeltaV. So we dramatically reduced the number of hours we believe it will take to make a very functional and proficient display for the operator. This fits squarely into our project certainty strategy that we've told you about many times. This is another one of the technologies and legs in that whole project certainty effort around making projects more digitized, more efficient, and reducing the schedule and the schedule risk on projects overall. Then we also took those same set of HCD experts and we turned them loose with operations people. And we took all of the good learnings that we'd had from working with an industry consortium called the Center for Operator Performance and the best practices they had put forward on how operation displays should be built to provide the best situational awareness for an operator. And we made sure that a lot of the native objects and features inside of this operations experience technology incorporated those best practices. So things like progressive disclosure, things like having a little area for an operator to put what they call on a watch list if there's a particular set of data they want to watch. So basically all of the expertise we've got both in-house and from COP has embedded in HCD principles inside of DeltaV Live. And then the third part I'd like to talk about is being a native HTML5 based technology, it's cross-platform. So we designed this, of course, to be a control room, high-performance operations environment for operators, but you can also use the same technology and even the same displays and bring them out into the field for mobile workers. Okay? So we're a very big announcement here, a very big technology leap forward for DeltaV. Again, that's something that we're demonstrating in the showroom floor if you have a chance to go see it. Now, speaking of taking foundational technologies like DeltaV technologies and enhancing and digitizing and making them more part of the digital transformation, I would like to introduce Mr. Jamie Froge, and he's going to talk to you about more things that we're doing in this area, in the software as a service area. Jamie?
Thanks, Peter.
All right.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. I want to echo Peter's comments that the dinner was really enjoyable last night. I really did have some great and intellectually stimulating conversations, and it was good to get to meet some of you. I was meeting you for the first time, so it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Peter, thanks for the discussion on DeltaV Live. First of all, Peter, our team, and how Peter collaborates across our various business groups, that collaboration is very important to make sure that we build an ecosystem of products that are easy to consume from our customers. So Peter, we appreciate your leadership on that front. We're very excited about Live launching. I'm going to talk to you today about, it's labeled software as a service. You may remember in 2015, we talked to you about this cloud-based engineering capability that we were launching that was going to assist us in the project phase of a customer's deployment, where we were able to use virtualization in a cloud-based environment to build the configuration of the system in that hosted environment. And there's a lot of benefits from that. I will talk to you today about the evolution of that, which we actually started working on in 2013. So we'll talk about how that's going. And we'll talk now about how that's a foundational element that's going to enable other offerings to the market in the form of a software as a service, whether that be digital twins of assets or the plant configuration, or as a landscape to do things like operator training and simulation. I'll also talk to you about how we view that product really as being, again, a foundational solution to enable customers to better take advantage of their project phase, their life cycle phase, to better take advantage of things like optimizing production. We talked a lot yesterday and at dinner about how this is just not about technology. This is about how we help our customers deploy it. We really need to understand their user environment, the barriers for them to deploy these different technologies, and we need to assist them to deploy them. And then we need to help them measure the results and the return that they get on those investments. And so we're talking today about technology, but we're really talking about a change in work practices, and we're talking about that intersection between people, process, and technology. Okay, so 2013, we start on a journey to create an environment where we can have a virtual cloud-hosted engineering system. It did not exist previously. Traditionally, as you saw in the Experience Center, and as many of you know, all of that happened in the physical world. When you're engineering a system, a lot of people fly to common sites and spend a lot of hours waiting for a workstation to be available, as you saw in the Experience Center, working together to do the engineering of the system. And then we would rent, or we'd purchase very expensive real estate in some cases to build out the entire configuration, including the cabinets, all of the equipment necessary to test. Customers, third parties would fly in. We'd spend a lot of time together, and we would do the FAT. Then we would go to site, and we would do the process all over again. A lot of time spent, a lot of expense that could be avoided. And most importantly, it is time away from our customers and our third-party partners doing things that are more productive. So we created this cloud-based engineering system that you see there, and I'm proud to say that over the last 3 years, we have now performed thousands of system configurations with our customers. So this is a very mature capability. And along that journey over the last few years, we've learned a lot about how customers would like to use that environment as an ongoing reference of their system that they can use during the life cycle of their operations. And so the next evolution is this operations reference system. And over time, we will create higher and higher fidelity versions of these digital twins that would allow you to have a virtual reference site. Today, we're going to focus on the operations reference system that we have created and that we will be launching to the market in the form of a subscription service that we will host for our customers. Okay, so a foundation for evolving customer needs. We talked about the project phase. Again, optimizing engineering and test. Folks can log in a secure fashion from remote locations to collaborate in the secure cloud environment to engineer and test the system. We have eliminated all of that waste that I talked about in the previous chart. And all of our engineering sites right now are capable of utilizing this capability. And again, thousands of customers have worked with us to do this. It's a very mature capability at this point. But we don't want there to be a wall or a break point between the project phase and the life cycle or the operations phase with the customer. We would like them to take advantage of all that work we've done to create a repository of their site, of their configuration, of their system, to use as a landscape for them to optimize things like maintenance, reliability, education services, and a variety of different performance services. I'll give you an example. I was with a customer earlier this year in Latin America that we did a project with. And the CEO of that entity and the plant manager were there at the meeting. I said, "How are things going?" It's been about a year and a half or so since the plant went operational. They said, "It's going pretty well. We've got the plant up and running. We feel like production's stable. We've had to spend a lot of time with our operators, getting them capable to manage the process. It's a greenfield site. And we built a lot of technology into the infrastructure to optimize things like advanced process control, loop tuning, or to optimize the reliability of the site. And we had a lot of work done early phases on how we would implement those work practices, but we didn't implement any of them yet. I said, well, why not? Well, we wanted to get production stable. We wanted to get yield stable. So, okay, that's fair. That makes sense. But a year and a half has passed, and it's gotten a little stale. And so the customer said, I said, what are you going to do next? Well, I'm going to put task force in place, two task force, my most talented people, one to focus on control optimization and one to focus on reliability optimization. And we're going to spend weeks or months determining what those work practices should be and how we utilize those technologies. And we're helping them currently do that work. But a year and a half's gone by. And if we were able to provide that reference system to them in a subscription service foundation where we host that for them and we keep that up-to-date, evergreen, secure configuration, and we were able to use that as a landscape for our consulting capability and our other practices to work with them so that day one, they're putting those capabilities into practice. That is a much more efficient way and more productive way for us to manage the life cycle of the customer relationship, and they agree. But we've got to make those tools easy to consume, easy to deploy. So that's one example that I've seen personally that I think can kind of break down these barriers between project phase and operational phase. We've got to stop thinking about them as two very distinct environments. And we need to help our customers figure out how to merge those two worlds to be the most productive. So I'm very excited today to tell you that in 2018, we're coming to market with two great products here. DeltaV Digital Twin will be a twin reference system of your plant configuration that we will offer again through subscription service, as well as the Mimic Dynamic Simulator that we will offer as a software as a service offering. Many of you may know we acquired Mina earlier this year, dynamic simulator company. We will be taking some of their technology and enabling that to be offered again in a software as a service fashion. Those two worlds work well together. They're going to coexist, and you can imagine being able as a customer to have a reference version of your system, and then also to be able to leverage operator training and simulation in that same fashion, in a virtual fashion, in a hosted environment. Much more productive, easier to deploy, easier to consume. You'll use it in the project phases, as we've talked about. You can use it to optimize the performance of the site as you do loop tuning, advanced process control, a variety of different things you want to simulate before you put into practice so that you make sure when you do that you know what the ROI is going to be, that you know you're going to do it safely, and that the plant will continue to run as it should run. It also will serve as a tool for our consulting business, which Peter alluded to, and you're going to hear about here very shortly, which is to go in and to help people understand the things that they could do to optimize their site. And this reference system will provide a landscape for them to try out a lot of different things and test and see what the ROI could be on a lot of the different things they'd like to put into practice. And our customers, in almost all cases, say, I wish that I had this evergreen, this up-to-date version of my configuration that I could use as a repository to lean on when I do future project planning, right? When I want to do an expansion of a plant or a site, or I'd like to do a new site, that I want to leverage the things that I've learned from previous execution to make sure we don't reinvent the wheel as much as possible. So I'm very excited. I think that these offerings and the strategy that we have here, you know, as you hear from Mike and Peter around automated workflow and decision support, workforce upskilling, mobility, change management, they touch on all of these elements. It's a foundational element, and we're not finished here. We're on a journey to continue to build out this capability for the benefit of our customers. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom Wan, who's going to talk to you about the new Operational Certainty Consulting Group that we're launching. Tom?
Great. Thank you, Jamie. And good morning to everyone. My name is Tom Wan, and I'm excited to be here today to announce our new consulting group that we're calling Operational Certainty Consulting. As Peter and Jamie talk to you about all the new technology that we're bringing to market to help our customers in digitizing their worker and digitizing the environment, my group's mission is to help them with how to leverage these new technologies, how to apply them and adapt them to new processes to be more optimal, and then how to enable that worker to be more productive. And as you saw from Peter's chart, the industry said that these are the three primary inhibitors that they're struggling with as to how to achieve the benefits available with these new automated technologies and the promise of IIoT to bring benefit to them. And the benefits are significant. These savings opportunities are significant in every industry, in both projects and in operations. And these are annualized numbers. My team of 100+ consultants around the globe have worked in all of these industries and come with skilled, experience and capability and are equipped to help our customers realize their share of these savings. IIoT automation technologies have unlocked significant savings opportunities in the areas of reliability, production, energy and emissions, safety. We've assembled a team of experts in each of these areas that will work with customers leveraging proven methodologies, best practices, intellectual property, patented processes to help customers optimize these functions to improve bottom line profitability. But optimizing functions is only part of the journey. To effectively leverage technology to enhance operational functions, you ultimately need to architect the data flow in your IT architecture, and then thoughtfully think through how to introduce and train your workers and how to leverage this new technology, how it's going to change the way they do their job day in and day out. Without careful attention to these important aspects, a customer won't achieve the benefits that the new technology has to offer. So what we've done is we've built a group with skilled resources in both the 4 key operational areas, along with seasoned solution architects and tools and methodologies to successfully drive change management. My team and I will work closely with customers in a very similar fashion to traditional business management consultants. But the main difference is we will stay with that customer from developing a strategy to implementing what we propose to then driving the implementation of that and measuring our progress and benchmarking our progress all the way through to completion. So we are committed to helping our customers achieve top quartile performance. And we come with a very solid foundation of expertise, tools, proven best practices and methodologies that we have performed successfully with over 150 customers just in the past few years. So let me bring up Mozam now to kind of take you through just another layer as to what exactly we will do. Mozam.
Good morning. Thank you, Tom. I'm here to take you through a little bit of the methodology that our consultants use when engaging with our customers in order to help them on that journey to top quartile performance and to realize operational certainty. I'm a solution architect within Tom's organization, and what I want to do is take you through a little bit of that methodology about how we're engaging with our customers. So Tom mentioned that jumpstart process that we use in order to help our customers along that journey for digitization. And what I want to do this morning is take you through one part of that methodology, and specifically that part of the methodology which is associated with the architecture. And so one of the very first things that we do when we're doing that architecture review with our customers is to actually look at where they are today, right? We look at the architecture, we try to get an understanding of how that architecture is serving the customer and serving the individual workers who are using that architecture. What essentially we're doing is actually looking and actually trying to benchmark that architecture and look at the gap between how that architecture is currently serving the plant or the asset, and potentially where does that architecture need to be in order for them to fulfill that ambition of digitization and IIoT. So that's a really important part of us understanding the data flow, how the user's interacting with that architecture and how they're deriving value out of it today and where they could potentially be in the future. Now, it's quite interesting that when our consultants engage with customers, we generally see kind of three scenarios out there. There are some customers and some sites that have a very clear vision about what they want to achieve with digitization, but actually they don't know how to get there. They've got a consulting study which puts out a grand vision for IIoT, but actually they don't know how to get there and how to achieve the results that they're looking for from digitization. Then we have customers who actually have no idea where to start and what that vision could look like for their facility. And finally, we've got some customers who've made some really smart decisions about outfitting their plants with some really capable technology and best-in-class technology, but really they have no overarching vision for how they can pull all of those technologies together to better serve their needs. And I'm pleased to say that our consulting organization can operate right the way across all three of those scenarios, and they're actively engaged in projects like that today. So let me take you through some of the challenges that we have today when we're engaging with our customers. And one of the very first things that we do is as I said earlier on, as part of that Jumpstart methodology, is that we look at the architecture. We look at the architecture and we get an understanding about what functions and applications the site's using. But importantly, we try to get an understanding about how those users are currently interacting with that architecture. And what we find today is that the challenge that these sites have is that a lot of that data is siloed. And it's siloed and locked into various platforms, which means fundamentally that work processes that the users are adopting can be quite inflexible because they're constrained and limited by the connectivity that the architecture has. So what could it be? And overall, what we find is that as a result, that architecture is really significantly underutilized. The other significant thing that we find is that sometimes there could be a really great application in one part of the architecture, but because there's no overarching strategy, the customer, the site, struggles to actually scale that application right the way across the facility, primarily due to kind of poor connectivity and the fact that that architecture is based upon very dated reference models. And so what could it look like? Well, you know, we know today that our plant workers and our teams are no longer working in a static environment. The environment that they're working in is very much dynamic. Our workers need to be much more multi-skilled, and those teams need to be agile. So the new way of looking at the digital worker is actually putting the focus on the digital worker and actually understanding the needs of that digital worker as an individual, and making sure that the architecture and the data flows are best serving those individuals who are accessing the system. Now, our consultants look at and understand what those workers are doing today, and as I said earlier on, really create a pathway for what their new job functions and what new work processes they could be using in the future. So they work to look at applications and data flows that are going to best serve those digital workers. And they engage and our consultants look at the work processes that they're using today and actually help the customer bridge that gap and help them along that journey to adapt their work processes. So it's not simply about us specifying technology and applications, but it's about helping them manage that change. Now, I've got a couple of examples here where I want to share with you about how we've helped customers along that journey. The first example was really associated with a customer who really wanted to get two things, really. Their objective was to get enhanced visibility of their asset and then actually to get their workers along a path of more situational fluency. And the way that they've done that is they've created an architecture, augmented their current architecture with a plant-wide Wi-Fi infrastructure that introduces mobility for the workers. And then significantly, they've introduced a wireless HART infrastructure, really to eliminate the necessity for routing all of that information through the DCS system, which could be a constraint, but actually augmenting that architecture, providing valuable information and actionable information directly to the users of that system. The second example I've got here is really about how our consultants have actually worked with a customer in order to help improve their preventative maintenance. With this customer, what we've done is we've actually centralized and implemented a central work order processing and maintenance strategy. And what that's done is that produced significant gains. This customer had a significant resource constraint, and we helped to re-engineer their processes, look at applications that centralize that scheduling function to give them significant gains in terms of planned work hours and then overall maintenance technician efficiency. So, hopefully you've got a little bit of an insight about how we engage with our customers from a consulting perspective, and you've got a little broad understanding about the methodology that we use. Thank you. And at this point, I'd just like to hand you over to Tanner.
Thank you, Mozan.
There you go, Tanner.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to kind of bring us home here. We've talked a lot about the technologies, the services to get companies up to top quartile and to get them really leveraging the Plantweb technology overall. But there's also this element of just foundational skills and upskilling of the workforce that has to be there for customers to really take advantage of it. So yesterday you heard from Stan Schoen at Rankin talk about how they're preparing the workforce of tomorrow to really come into this industry and best be prepared. I'm going to talk to you today about how we're actually taking those people, getting them upskilled as quickly as possible once they enter the workforce, and then how do we keep them current as they go out throughout their careers to best leverage these capabilities. So you saw this slide yesterday, just to touch on it briefly. This is really about how technology, as technology changes, the way people learn is changing as well. And we see that everywhere. Peter mentioned yesterday kind of the YouTube generation and how we've just gotten so used to, if we need to know something, we Google it and it's there, right? So we have to be very conscious of how we best implement this technology to cater to those learning needs. And as I go through the talk today, you'll hear a little bit about some of the specific things we're doing to do that. I'm going to talk to you about 3 specific things today in areas where we're really driving change around educating the workforce. The first is launching some programs to get people from new in the industry or very inexperienced all the way up to a high-performing individual within the shortest amount of time possible. I'm going to talk to you about a program specifically around new control system engineers and how we're working that. Secondly, I'm going to talk about delivering what we call competency-based programs. This is really an extension of the consulting methodology you just heard about, but partnering that with the right technology in the plant so that customers have access to it in real time when they need to go back and learn these things and stay refreshed on them. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about just the investments we're making overall. We know that as we want to enable learning more quickly and more efficiently, that takes a significant capital investment as well. So first off, this week we're launching a new program called Control Performance Academy. This is targeted at new process control engineers or those who have not been in the industry for a long time. As you're all aware, we're facing this challenge where a lot of the people who have been in the plants for a very long time are now retiring. They're taking that knowledge with them. And as new controls engineers come in, they don't have the luxury or the benefit of spending 10 or 15 years to really learn these things, nor do they have the benefit of being able to experiment on the plant the way they maybe used to be able to years ago. So what we're trying to do with this program is to really get as much experience and perspective for new process control engineers as quickly as possible. We're doing this through a program that we've actually used internally for some time now. What we do is we put it into 3 phases, kind of a basic instrumentation phase, what we call a control performance fundamentals phase, and then finally the control performance specialist phase. So it's a series of curriculum that's combined both online, in class, and a number of different workshops over the course of 18 to 24 months. But the thing that we do differently with this is we actually pair customers with experienced process control consultants within Emerson. So they get the coaching and the mentoring and kind of that direct feedback about what's working and what's not working. So we do this in a period of about 18 to 24 months. And we know it works, again, because we've been doing this internally for some time now. So we're excited to launch this to actual customers as well. Secondly, I'm going to talk a little bit here about how we're maintaining proficiency through what we call competency-based development. So this is a process, again, an extension of our consulting methodology where we come in and we work with customers on the things they need to learn for specific job roles and not the things that they don't need to know. So traditionally you might come to a class for a week and you learn a lot of really neat things, but then you go back to the plant and you maybe use 10 or 20% of that and the rest of it is just kind of extra, right? So while that's nice, we know we just don't have the benefit of that today in the work environment and with the time constraints that are out there. So we work with customers to really make sure they're getting a very tailored and custom curriculum for specific job roles, whether that's maintenance techs, whether that's controls engineers, et cetera. But then, you know, the thing that we always struggle with is they'll take these classes, they'll come back, and it might be weeks or months before they use them. Things get stale. It's really difficult to stay current. So on the right-hand side there, you see where we're actually pairing this methodology with technology that is utilized in the plant itself. And we make it as simple and efficient as possible through cloud-based operator training. You heard a little bit about that before. A new concept we're really introducing called maintenance training. So similar to operator training, we're building these skids that actually enable customers to go back, have this skid in their facility to be able to go practice specific things before they have to go out and do a configuration or calibration on a device in the plant. So if you get a chance in the exhibit hall, we're actually showing an example of this in the Rankin Technical College booth. Rankin's been partnering with us to develop these skids, and we have an example in the exhibit hall. And then finally, we're doing what we call on-demand refresher training. So these are nice short snippets, things that we can do to come back and have that access locally in the plant, whether it's online videos, whether it's access to virtual systems, these types of things, but putting it in a way that couples up with the classroom-based curriculum to go back and refresh that memory. So finally, I'm going to talk a little bit just about some of the investments we're making. So in the online world, I just mentioned a little bit about some of the kind of refresher-based things. One of the things we've also launched is a whole series of online video tutorials and how-to videos. This is kind of an introduction, if you will, to our capabilities and the broader learning-based curriculum that we offer. So we just did a complete refresh of our web infrastructure. These are out there available, and we think a nice way to get people in. Again, it's that kind of YouTube mentality that's out there. And then finally, we know that as nice as online learning is, it's never a substitute for hands-on, you know. So we've made a considerable investment in our brick and mortar facilities. In fact, over the last 2 years, we've either upgraded or built from scratch 11 facilities globally, plus considerably more with some of the Pentair acquisition and components there. And one of the ones that we're most proud of and most excited about, you're going to go see here in just a little bit. This is what we're calling the interactive plant environment. You'll see the example of it here in Shakopee. This is actually the second example that we've built. We have one up and running in Charlotte, North Carolina already. But the concept with this is if you come to a class and come to a learning environment, you want to learn in the most efficient way as possible on the things that you're actually going to be doing when you go back to your facility. And so we've tried to emulate that as much as possible. So in this scenario, people will come to class and they'll do things like, rather than just configure a transmitter on a bench top, they'll actually take that learn how to do, take a work order, do a hot break work permit, those types of things, just like they would when they go back. They wear full personal protective equipment, and it really simulates the actual environment. This is really slick. You just have to kind of see it to really appreciate it, and you guys are going to get a chance to do that here shortly. So with that, that's just kind of a quick overview, and really excited to share more of this with you guys, and thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Tanner. So, those were some of the topics that we wanted to go into a little more depth after we gave you the overview yesterday on what we're doing, both from the technology part on the Plantweb digital ecosystem, as well as what we're doing internally to help our customers undergo that digital transformation, whether it's the educational stuff that we just talked about or whether it's the consultant services that Mozam showed you. So again, we forge forward with the Plantweb digital ecosystem. We have our new additions that you see on the chart there with our consulting capability and the software as a service offerings that Jamie talked to you about. All this stuff is available to be seen down on the exhibit floor. It's a great place to go in there and see this stuff in real world. You're also going to get to see now, very shortly, in real world, the best-in-class education facility there that we have in Shakopee. Again, this is the goal, right? The goal is, hey, we've, over the last 30 years, had a great productivity run-up for a while inside of the production process industries. That's kind of stalled in the last 5 or 10. How are we going to get that back up there? Well, we have all the technology in the world, as we've all been talking about for a long time. Now it's really figuring out how to make that technology embedded in the work processes and make customers actually figure out how to embrace that and get it embedded into their processes and plants. We now have some time, I believe, for a Q&A.
Last night we were discussing a little bit about IIoT and perhaps the stall or lack of adoption at this point in time. And from my perspective as an industry analyst, I think that one of the major issues is confusion and lack of understanding about how to proceed. Everything's called a platform. People don't know how to distinguish one platform from the next or to figure out what their architectures are. So I think that you're taking a good step in that direction because I firmly believe we are still in the educational phase. And I think this new service that you're launching is sorely needed, so congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. If all of them are like that, we're in great shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, even I could have taken
No,
it.
that was,
Yeah.
that was,
$20 later, Paula. No, I'm just
Hi. Just to follow up on that, though, the fact that you've had to introduce all these services or are introducing them, excuse me, does imply that you've been, at least to a degree, surprised at the need for it. Is there, anecdotally, is there any way that you can illustrate what you find at the plant level today in terms of understanding? Cloud now is 30% of enterprise systems are in the cloud, but for some of these other technologies, where is the misunderstanding coming?
I don't know if it's a misunderstanding. I think what you see in our customer environments, they're very complex and they're very heterogeneous. So when you go to those sites, you will find a lot of folks that see what the needs are. And you'll find a lot of folks that say, I wish it was like this. I think what's happened is the way a lot of our customers are structured, they're not organizationally designed for this new world. And so a lot of those folks that you may sell products to historically day to day aren't necessarily the people that will enact that change organizationally to enable these things to be adopted. So one of the things you need to do is that we're trying to implement here is to have a different dialogue with other folks in the organization, some that have more influence over what organizational design and change management looks like, so that we can get incentives aligned within the customer environment so that all those great things that customers want to do can be done. So I think the good news is it's not a matter of they don't know if they want to do it or they've heard about cool technologies, but they're trying to figure out if that's really something they want to adopt. That's less the case of just how do we get incentives aligned so that we can do the things we know we want to do. And that's what we're trying to enable.
We've got one over here, and then we'll do that one.
Hi.
Great presentations this morning, great stuff. Really love the direction. Jamie, you're talking about project certainty on one side, and then in essence linking it with operational certainty. So we, whole asset life cycle view.
Sure.
But inside these organizations, right, those are a lot of different stakeholders
Sure.
Involved in that. So are you finding that you're having to go sort of up the corporate food chain to get somebody who's got sort of a vision or authority across those silos, those functional silos?
Yeah, it's a journey we're on. As we talked about last night at dinner, I mean, change management is important. Any walk of life, we do something for a long time, it's hard to do something different. And, look at electronic marshaling. Who today in this room would say, well, I'm not sure if electronic marshaling has any benefit? Like, no one would say that. The whole industry is now rallied around that. It took quite a few years to get there. It took power sponsors at organizations to take a chance, to implement it, to see the benefits, and then for those stories to proliferate with others to say, hey, well, why would we not do it? If they're getting the benefits, we should too. I think you'll see similar kinds of things happen in this evolution, where you're going to need to find those folks that get on the track, see the benefits, and then those become stories of the industry that people rally around, and you'll see organizational design change, and you'll see change management. I think one of the things we talk about is we don't need a customer to just buy in and do everything all at once. It doesn't have to work that way. We're trying to package things that are out of the box ready, as well as whole plant capabilities. If you want to go there right away, we can do that. If we can get folks to do one little thing that they see great ROI on, then they say, what else could we do? And then it starts to build a culture, and it starts to build momentum, and then it becomes a way of doing things, not the flavor of the day. That's the danger. You don't want this to become technology flavor of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. On the Control Performance Academy, is that strictly focused on Emerson controls, software, and products? And I guess there are two other things, the cost of it, and third, are you helping companies find people?
So in terms of whether it's focused on Emerson controls specifically, obviously that's our core competence, but it's not exclusive to that, right? So some of the toolkit components that we use, the Intech toolkit that are part of it, are not exclusive to DeltaV, so that's universal.
So you teach control programming for other vendors and
We teach a lot of the control strategy fundamentals and those components, right? Obviously, we're going to be better at it on our own systems in terms of the details and all of that. But the things that are universal in terms of loop tuning and optimization and those things, we are happy to teach regardless, right? So that's we think it's something that's out there. It's pretty universal, and we can do. In terms of the cost, we're still finalizing some of that. I think it's something that will be very competitive and compelling with regard to something of this nature, right? So in terms of the kind of cost benefit, we want to make it a no-brainer for customers. And in terms of how are we helping to find new controls engineers, that's really a lot of the partnerships we're doing with these schools, right? So there's kind of two elements to that. One is we want to make sure people obviously are aware of Emerson technology when they come into the industry, right? That's pretty obvious. But there's also an element of we want to make sure that our customers can be as successful as possible. Again, that's in our best interest, but I think the industry's interest as a whole. So,
an earlier questioner had asked, how come you kind of didn't see this coming? Well, I would take a point against that. The industry as a whole, the great crew change has already happened. Those of us who work there are elsewhere. So you're having to, and your competitors, trying to find a way to put in place the people, human capital, that they haven't invested in. My question has to do with the mentoring side, which I love, for the training program. Are these mentors as much as possible somebody where the guy can actually have a cup of coffee with his mentor, or is this a virtual mentor?
No, this is, so, we have to work within the constraints of geography and things like that for sure. But wherever possible, we will take advantage of the face-to-face time. So, and these are not just, any controls engineers. These are the folks that we use as consultants that have, 20, 30 plus years of experience and been doing this in the field. And they're also the kind of people that are good at having those discussions, right? Sometimes, our controls experts aren't necessarily probably the best teachers, but in this case, we have several that are, and so that's the intent, to pair them with them.
One of the highlights, I think, of the presentation was on connected services, and I applaud the efforts to expand that across different asset classes. Two questions around the connected services. One, when you look at those different asset classes, are you providing a platform or targeting the OEMs to work through the platform, and are you helping them deliver a better business model to your joint customers? And then second, it's easy to tunnel in access for one person or one company into a plant. When you try and scale that, right? Emerson's not the only company trying to do it. Every OEM, every automation vendor is trying to do it. So when you have 50, 100 connections into a plant, that becomes very difficult to manage. So is Emerson doing anything to help your customers manage all of the third parties that want access to the plant?
Yeah. So to me, the whole connected service thing is it's a means of delivering domain expertise. And regardless of the types of connections, the platforms that are evolved, in the end, the guys that are going to quote unquote win, if you will, in IoT are the ones that have domain expertise, because that's really what people are paying for, right? Whether it's a Fitbit if you have a Fitbit on your wrist, who do you want, looking at the data from your Fitbit? Well, the best doctor in the Mayo Clinic, right? You would pay extra, right, to get, that level of capability to work on it. So I think we, as well as others, are targeting those assets that we know. First of all, people most immediately trust the person who made it. We're targeting, as a sensor vendor, particularly in rotating equipment, we have some unique domain expertise in some other areas where we can do diagnosis. So we've also been in the rotating equipment monitoring business for 30 plus years, back from when we first bought CSI. Some of the other assets we're covering are more, I call them generic assets that are well understood, and you can go get ASME models for and everything. But then you see other people offering the connected services in their area of domain expertise. So you see a lot of the EPCs, that have designed the particular process, offering connected services on doing the process troubleshooting, because their whole point is, hey, we got a dynamic, we got a model right here that we use to build your process with. Who better knows how to tell you to run it than we do? So that problem you just described, I think, is going to exist, because you look at it and you say, well, maybe there should be one person, or customers intuitively might say, it would be great if I had one connection and then it went to one place where everyone was doing all of that. Okay. GE tried to put forward that concept. That was a big part of their whole story when they first launched Predix. I do think that's a concept that will happen, but I don't think the platform that's going to be done on, not trying to throw rocks, is going to be GE. It's going to be the cloud service providers, because those are the environments that every one of our customers' IT organizations have already vetted as being, secure and robust places where they want to put data. Any one of them who's gone to Office 365, for instance, is already on Azure, just like we are at Emerson. Okay. So when you really look where everybody's lining up, with a very few exceptions, I think Microsoft is well positioned, just to be blunt, to be the one that actually fulfills the vision that GE put forward. Okay, so I think as this settles out, what will happen is, most of those guys, all of us who are in this business, will be on one or the other of the large cloud platforms. Google, Microsoft, Amazon. In China, it'll be somebody else because of the strong national kind of directions there. And I think that problem will get resolved down to just a couple of places where connections have to be set up and data goes to, because in the end it'll be the big cloud guys that are the ones that are the unifying sort of, at least at the data access layer, the unifying infrastructure that data gets pulled into. Okay, there'll be different portals as different guys, different ways of reports and different portals. Again, it might be nice to see that all in one integrated form factor, but that would be like saying, gee, I'd like to see what my lawyer thinks I should do, what my doctor thinks I should do, what my accountant thinks I should do, and all these people interface with you in your life, in one unified kind of view. Okay, well, that hasn't happened and isn't likely to happen either. But I do think that the connectivity part will resolve over the years because it'll be the big cloud guys that own that. And, you know, we obviously believe Azure is the right platform right now. We're not alone. When you look at a lot of our other competitors, the other guys have got one or two other folks who've signed up with them as well.
Hi, guys. Given all the connections that Plantweb and all the associated services are making, the inevitable question is always, how do you make it secure?
Well, that's why we have a secure first mile. So that was a big part of the discussion we just had, I think, when we talk about the connected services piece. So when Mozam goes in with his guys and they're looking at that internally inside of a plant computing infrastructure, then it's the more traditional, how do we separate the IT, OT? You might want to comment on that a little.
Yeah.
For connected services, that's where we are pioneering all these secure first mile types of methods for getting the data in the cloud. So Mozam, you might want to comment what you've run into there.
Yeah, so we're making a change really in our organization, and what we've been doing over the last number of years is that we've been seeing that there's this increased drive to connectivity. And so as a result, what we've been doing is upskilling our organization and our consulting capability so that we've got people within our organization who are agile enough and versatile enough to communicate across both our IT and OT organizations. There's a lot of different strategies for protecting and securing a connectivity, taking data from point A and delivering it to point B. And there's a lot of different appliances to do that. Security is built into all of our products. But we not only have to recognize the security that we build into our products, but we've also got to be able to respond to the needs of our end users, because sometimes they have some additional layers of security, some additional appliances and strategies that they may want to apply when they're actually architecting an overall solution. And so what we've been doing over the last few years is particularly, with the IT folks is really working to upskill people within our organization, as I said, so that they can traverse that boundary between IT and OT. And so communicate all the way from the automation domain right up into the IT domain and then further into the enterprise system. Because there is that increasing prevalence now of taking data out of the automation domain. That's now becoming more common practice, and taking it further up into the enterprise. And so our key strategy around that is to really work with a lot of the vendors who provide security technology so that we're well versed with that. And naturally, we're already competent to understand the security provisions that we have in our own within our own applications and appliances. So it's really about bringing together some skills that we've had to develop to understand where the industry's going, the IT competency, and really building upon our own core
Yeah. If you look at, too, like in the IT world, how virtualization and cloud computing evolved, there wasn't a mad rush to virtualize everything. People looked at their application stack and said, what things make most sense to virtualize first? Things that I think are less critical to operations. And when we get comfortable, we learn from that. We know what worked, what didn't work, what additional procedures need to put in place, then that expanded. The same things happened with cloud computing in the IT environment, right? So I think we will be conscientious of how we pace those things. So for example, if you look at our engineering reference system that we're going to host, there's an isolation between the physical plant and that reference system. There's not a direct digital connection. Okay, we have a secure hosted environment. We have work processes that will allow us to keep it up to date with what the physical plant is doing. But we prevent people, there's an air gap there where you can't tunnel in. So isolation in some areas will be important until we get comfortable, right? But I think what I'm saying is, you'll look at the application stack, you define the criticality of the data. There's some data that can be pushed to a cloud in a way where if anyone were to steal it, it wouldn't be meaningful to them to change or to attack the operations of the plant. And there's other data that would be. And you have to handle those things differently. And we're thoughtful of that as we roll out these new products and services.
And one last thought. I think security is a great example of where you can have all the technology in the world, and if it's not applied and people understand how to apply it, it doesn't matter. Because if you look at all the well-publicized incidents recently, it wasn't like these were zero-day things that nobody could have seen or anything. But there was, in every case, there was some security practice that wasn't followed properly or some security design that wasn't put in properly or whatever.
There's a Microsoft patch available that wasn't
installed.
Yeah.
You know, so again, it comes back to this whole discussion topic we've been having the last couple days around, okay, you can have technology, if it's not applied properly and ingrained into the work process, it's not going to matter.
I'm curious in the consulting area. Part of the discussion was we're dealing with the IT data flows, and there seems to be various models right now. I know companies, major ones, that say once it leaves the controller, it's all IT now from that point on. Others that collaborate, or automations under the IT group, and of course the other, that are almost at a standoff as separate groups. What's happening in the landscape from your consulting experience?
Yeah, I'll take that.
You've seen a lot of those.
Yeah, so I've seen.
What do you think is the best approach?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of those scenarios where as organizations shift and as data shifting around in those organizations, they're really trying to understand, you know, who should manage what. And I think really that's a key in all of this, is to understand and differentiate about what's most appropriately managed by IT and what remains under control of the automation folks, right? And I think it's that differentiation that really provides the key in actually having a discussion that you can build upon. So, for example, when you're working with the IT guys, what we want to do with those guys is to make sure that they're providing the transit of that data through the organization and providing some assurance and timeliness in ensuring that that data gets to the point of delivery in a timely and relevant time manner. And sometimes the IT folks don't understand that, because their way that they look at data is very much different to, the automation folks. We look at data in real time, whereas, the hurdle that the IT folks have had to get over is to actually appreciate the fact that when something's gone wrong, we need to know in relevant time so that we can take action, right? That it's not something that's going to occur within a certain window of time or window of support. So the ideal model is really to differentiate and understand that the IT guys will be responsible for the routing and transmission of that data. They should take responsibility for that. But they need to be cognizant of the fact of, about what priority that data needs to go under. Some of that requires training of the IT guys, and that's something that we are significantly involved in at the moment, is training IT guys and upskilling them to really understand our domain and the dynamics that occur within our domain. And currently, the way that Emerson is operating is that we kind of, I had an example the other day of a large oil major who really referred to Emerson as the glue, right? They saw us today as a broker and the expert advisor in helping in that change management process and being the glue today between IT and OT as they upscale and change and reorganize and develop new organizational models. We know that that's not going to happen overnight, which is particularly where, our consulting organization comes into play under Tom's leadership, is that we're actually there now proactively being that glue and helping both the IT guys and OT guys make that transition. Is there one perfect way of doing this? I think, a lot of organizations are on a journey of discovery. Like I said earlier on today, we see three distinct ways that organizations are shaped up. We've got organizations who've got great vision, but they don't really have a strategy to translate that vision into reality. And then there's some folks who just don't have a plan at all. They want to get on this journey, but they don't know where to start. And, what we're doing is to try and service all of those and by unifying our consulting efforts to kind of support those, those customers.
So is it fair to say the front end of your consulting is facilitating an education between all these groups?
Absolutely,
Sure.
and that's organizational alignment. That's the very first process step in our jumpstart process, right? Is organizational alignment, getting everybody around the table, understanding what their drivers are, and actually giving everybody a common sense of purpose about what that new reality could be.
So, look, like IoT, in general, as I said, we think it's more evolutionary, revolutionary. IT-OT convergence is real, but it's also not new, right? It started the first time in the 90s, automation guys all started using Windows. That's when it all first started, okay? And I would say over the 20, something years since then, it's been more like warring factions. And just look at the language that's used as people describe their architectures, right? We're going to build a DMZ, right, between the control environment and the IT. Well, okay, what's a DMZ? A barrier between warring factions, okay, that we're exactly, yeah, okay. So I think the change that's happening now is the recognition that no, we need to be thinking more about how we merge, IT and OT in a logical way than just figuring out peaceful coexistence by establishing, rigorous boundaries between so that you work on your part and I work on my part, okay? And I think the organizations, and you do see some that have these, what they call production IT is typically the term used for groups, that are IT guys focused on the OT world. Mm-hmm. That tends to be the approach where they get it as to how do we actually merge some of it. And I think one of the models I think that's pretty good right now that is put forward is the one that the Nomura guys have put forward, if you've seen that, as they look at Industry 4.0, and they talk about, look, the control system is going to be a control system. Security is going to go up around it, but some of the functions are going to move out more into this broader, just, operations IT kind of realm. Cloud computing is going to be a big part of that. These protocols are going to be a part of it because we're still going to have to keep that heartbeat, of control still going. That's the last thing, if ever, that we'll see go to the cloud is the actual fundamental first level control, both from latency point of view and just customers' comfort with having having that on premise. I use an example. Okay, self-driving cars. Google, cloudiest guys of them all, right? Are they controlling those cars from the cloud? No. Those clouds all have on-premise control systems, sensors, all the analytics, all that stuff, how they tune the control. Yep, that's all in the cloud. But that core heartbeat of driving the car is still sitting there in the cloud. And that's what in the car. And that's what the Nomura guys have put forward, and I think that's actually, a reasonable model of where we're headed.
The other thing that's happened is we've lived this ourselves, right? IT used to be, within our own professional setting, something that, okay, just don't let my computer stop working and make sure my phone's functioning, right? And now IT is a business partner. You don't roll out things like the software as a service applications that we're rolling out without a very close partnership with the IT community to understand how to build that model in a way that's secure, that you can commercialize. Because the service level around offering that's completely different than offering it as an engineering service, right? So we've lived through that. It wasn't a no-brainer transition for us. The good news is we've gone through it, so we kind of know what worked, what didn't work. And you have to embrace that IT community as a business partner. And so we've got to do that to help our customers feel that way about them by bridging those gaps.
Okay, thank you. Next question's Paul and then Paula. Okay, first. Just, can we do Paul instead of Paula?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Let's do Paul and then your next Paula. And we still have time, so we're good.
Okay, my question kind of follows on Peter's allegory about the Fitbit and the Mayo Clinic. As you extend that digital twin from engineering into operations, and you as a subscription service, how proactive can you be about helping people out with problems? I mean, why should I subscribe instead of just putting my digital twin in my plant?
Yeah, no, I think that first of all, you also got to look at the core competencies of the companies, right? So Jamie talked earlier about the types of data that, which ones are going to move first. The same thing is true with connected services, right? Part of the reason we've seen pretty good success with valves, and we think we'll continue to see good success, is although they're an important part of the plant, when push comes to shove, a lot of our customers don't have the domain expertise in-house anymore, and they view it as something that, okay, we're fairly comfortable giving that to someone like Emerson, to Terry and his team over there, who are the world's leading supplier of valve technology. Okay, that's somebody I'll trust. Okay, my steam traps. All right, yeah, I can believe somebody do that. Oh, how I'm running the process. Well, wait a minute. That's what I do. Okay, that's kind of my core competency here, as an operator, as a Shell, a Chevron, an ExxonMobil, a BASF, whatever they may be. So, they're going to work their way up the chain. Different people are going to have different comfort levels with how far they're willing to go on that outsourcing. The actual operation of the process and process knowledge, I think, will be the very last thing to go, because at that point in time, there's really not a domain expertise that you can point to that these guys are doing.
Well, the other piece is there's use cases. So, okay, here's what happens today in many cases. We go through the engineering of it, we create the system, they say, sure, I'd love a reference copy. Plants change, right? So there's fixed adds and changes. The system doesn't get updated. We don't know if it has the right security patches on it. We don't know if it's the right version. It loses control over time. So they don't want to use it as a reference system because they're not sure that it's representative of their actual operation. And they're not in the business of wanting to keep things up to date. They're in the business of running the process. Now, training becomes an issue because you say, well, I can't train on today, you have to go build a fixed training site on a fixed workstation or a fixed server, sometimes build a room and have people go there, right, and sit there and do the training, versus I keep this site evergreen. I make sure that it's representative of your plant for you, because you don't want to do that. They've told us we don't like to do that. Now we have a landscape to do other kinds of services in that environment that you've kept.
Fire called that drive the car, if you remember. So the first company we ever did the connected service on the DeltaV system with, it was exactly as Jamie said, and that's the terminology they use. We don't want to maintain the car. We want to drive the car. So you can keep that DeltaV system updated, patched, running, holistic, but we're going to drive it. Okay, you're not going to operate our plants for us. Right. Paul, you look like you have another follow on there.
Just to make sure, how much is it me coming to you with my problems versus you coming to me with recommendations based on what you see?
Well, I tell you, the first use case, again, it varies by use case. Here's what we see prevalently is that I want a reference system. Okay, number one is I want a repository of that configuration because I want to use it for plant expansion, or I want to use it for planning of a new site. So that use case is prevalent. So you say, okay, well, if you even just use it for that, there's value. And then I would say next on that is it's too hard to do training today. It's just too hard. We don't want to maintain the car. Okay, I just don't, so I don't do it as much. Do I know it? If you ask do I know I need to do it? They'll all say yes, absolutely, we know we need to do more of it, right? Without hesitation. But they don't want to go through the steps to do it today. It's too hard. The next thing is simulation. They would like it to be easier to test out things before they put them into plant operations. They would like to do that. Now they need assistance with that. That's a consultative engagement that has a software element to it, but the tool helps that. Our feeling is, again, get people on a platform that they have a very direct need for, start using it for that purpose, seeing the value of it, use the next use case, see value from that, say this is great, this is something I'm glad I did, and then they'll use it more and more for other use cases. So we will offer that capability. I think we'll start off with the reference system. We'll start off focused on operator training and different types of simulation. And then we will learn from the customer how they want to use it in more sophisticated ways, and we'll develop our roadmap along that journey.
Okay, Dave, do you have one?
Yes. What role do you see AI or machine learning play in the connected services, and who would be developing it?
So we actually are planning to use, in the valve stuff, we're going to use the streaming analytics. That's an IoT service, an Azure connected service. And then depending on what other kinds of equipment that we'll be looking at, we'll use things like ML that's in Azure or the other analytics tools that are up there. It totally depends on the problem you're trying to solve, which one is applicable. For a lot of the things like valves, where we don't need to do, strictly speaking, statistical machine learning, pattern recognition things, where we have first principle knowledge. We can embed that in some of the other tools. As you get to more sophisticated equipment, then you're going to go into more of the pattern recognition stuff. And it's us that are, I mean, it's, you know, it's our domain expertise in practice. Again, that's what we think customers are going to be paying us for, is they're going to be paying us for having the best valve doctor who does nothing but look at valves, you know, every time he's at work, you know, at the other end of the line, looking at their data. Paula did have a question.
Yes,
so
Paula, did you want to take the last one? Because we're getting close to ending.
Was going to build on the convergence topic. I like to include ET, engineering technology, in that convergence. And I think that's
he talked about
what
that
you're talking about. You're acting as the ET expert in this case to bridge that IT-OT gap.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important part. I think perhaps in the past maybe it was alluded to in the conversation, but I think ET needs to be expressly called out in this convergence that we're headed towards.
It's a good point, yeah.
Thank you all very much.